Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Yep, it's the world's most dangerous morning show, The Breakfast Club. Charlamagne the God, Angela Yee, DJ Envy is not with us today, but right now we got my guy, man. Man, what does he not do? What do you not do, Tim? He's the founder of Unite. He was a longtime chairman of the Special Olympics. He's a best-selling author, and he's got a new book out right now, The Call to Unite. My man Tim Shriver is on the line. What up, Tim?
I'm good, my friend. I'm good. So it's going to be a bestseller because you're in it. Everybody knows that, you know.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of being a part of the Call to Unite during the pandemic, which I thought was a very good moment because, you know, it was just a lot of people who needed some inspiration. They needed a reason to be optimistic, and I feel like we gave them that a little bit.
You know, I think we did. I mean, you know, look, this is hard work. You know, Shar, as you know, the country's divided. You know, the world is divided. Our neighborhoods are divided. People are divided. And there's a lot of people benefiting from division. You know, a lot of people spew division, hatred, demonizing violence, and benefit from it. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we're out, you know, you're out with the show, you know, with your whole life, really trying to elevate people so that we can see each other with equal dignity, with equal respect. And that's the uniter message, but it's a tough one, you know? So, you know, did the call to unite change everything? No, but I think a lot of people, and I mean, maybe you heard this, a lot of people saw in it and see in it now and see in this book a shot, something that will tell them they got a team out there that's ready to help them relieve their pain, address their pain points, and move forward with a more hopeful spirit.
So this book is a compilation of different people telling their stories during this pandemic. And whose idea was it to come together and put this out?
Well, it's a good question, Angela, but I mean, in some ways it was a collective idea. Like Shar and I talked about 6 or 7 months before this, we talked about how could we bring the country together around the mental health needs of children and around the mental health needs of Black and brown folks. And, you know, after that, we talked with a bunch of other people who were talking about how do we bring the country together around, you know, healthcare issues. And then when the pandemic hit, it was all of a sudden sort of like there's all these people who want to address the spiritual crisis in our country. Oprah, you know, Bishop Jakes, Dr. Rita Walker, Rick Warren, you know, George W. Bush, all these people. And they were all in some ways in the back of my head saying, we're willing to work hard to overcome this division. Give us a shot. So all I did was, like, I opened the phone. I thought everybody's going to say no. You know how it is. You call the guest you can't get. You expect them to say no. And surprisingly, people said, yeah, this is important. I want to give myself to this. And they spoke authentically. You know, Angela, I think one of the beautiful things in the book and on the show was it wasn't rehearsed speeches. You know, some of us have, you know, people have their rehearsed talk. This was people talking from their pain, from their heart. You know, Common speaks about, you know, the soul, the sound of angels is what your soul hears. You know, he just put that on the screen from his heart and invited people, remember, even in your pain, your soul can hear the sound of angels. And so it was just, I don't know, it's just like, it refreshed my belief in the goodness of humanity, honestly. And I hope other people's too. Many people have told me the same thing.
How do you think the pandemic made America realize, like, the only way we're going to win is to unite? Like, it's literally us versus, you know, white supremacy. Like, why do you think the pandemic brought enough of us together?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of things woke people up. Let's be honest. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. A lot of things that a lot of people knew for a long time about division, about racism, about white supremacy, about loneliness. You know, these things were out there, but, you know, for some reason we just kept going along as though they didn't exist at the higher levels. The pandemic brought them out, you know, and this is where, you know, Bishop Jakes in here, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it again, Sharp, but Bishop Jakes' contribution, I mean, people have called me from around the world about this. His quote is, you know, he talks about finding himself in tears in the midst of the pandemic, just unable to deal with one more crisis, one more loss, one more person who can't even have a funeral. Says he finds himself just, you know, overwhelmed with sadness. And then he says in the book That's the kind of pain I don't run from, I run to. He says, because pain always leaves a gift. Now, I've talked to people like in my own family who've lost people during the pandemic, tragedy, and they're struggling with that. What do you mean? You know, the pain is too deep. I don't see it. I can't feel the gift. But I think what Bishop Jakes, at least for me, is trying to get at in his selection is, you know, this pain of this pandemic, as horrible as it has been, to see it on the front pages of our newspapers and on our television screens, the gift it's leaving is us. It's giving us back to ourselves. It's telling us we need all of you. You can't solve these problems alone. You can't win by dividing. You can't win with superiority. You can't win with exclusion. You can't win with isolating people. You can't win with domination. It won't work. It's like the pandemic screamed at us. George Floyd is crying at us. It can't work this way.
What does pain always leaves a gift mean to you personally?
You know, in the depth of my soul, it means that even when we lose what we thought we couldn't live without, there's a force that's going to sustain us. You know, and I think, you know, I've been in so many, you know, I'm a man who still, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I still cling to my faith. I'm like a church rat, you know, like I go to as many church services, many religions as I can find. And, you know, those ladies in the aisle when the preacher gets going and the music carries you away and, you know, tears start to come down from your face. They don't ask you, are you white or black when they bring the tissue? You know, the choir doesn't look out and say, I'm singing only for the young or the old or the Republicans, the Democrats. They sing to your soul. They sing to everybody's soul. And what I feel like in my life, and you know, I'm not special, but I've seen my fair share of grief from the time I was a little boy till today, and I've seen my fair share of pain, like everybody else. I'm not, like I say, I have no position of privilege on this, but I do believe that through it all, I've been sustained by a force bigger than me, and all those losses are still people and hopes and dreams that are still caring for me in some way. I mean, I know, I feel like that's what sustains me. And I hope it's what, in some ways, you know, I know we don't, as a country, we don't have a religion, but I hope we have faith. And those are two different things.
Absolutely.
I saw that Naomi Campbell's in the book too, and she asked the question, how do we stay in this compassionate state, right? We're talking about everything that people have come together to make sure, even though some are trying to divide, there are people who are supporting, uplifting, coming together, going above and beyond what they even knew was possible for themselves. So now, even after this, how do we stay in this compassionate state?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Naomi says in the book, there are no borders anymore. Naomi has worked across countries throughout Southern Africa, throughout Sub-Saharan Africa, throughout the world, really. And she brought African leaders, you know, from different countries to the call and to the book. She had beautiful selections here. I mean, I think, Angela, it's the big question. It's the big question. My hope is that we can start with schools and, you know, teaching. You know, Shar and I have talked about this for years with Tim Ryan, you know, and others. We should teach compassion. We should teach stress management. We should teach feelings identification. We should teach trauma. We should teach identity. We should help children understand that when they feel pain, some of it might not be their fault, right? Some of it may be the fault of larger forces. Help them to understand what to do with their anger, not crush it, not deny it, but channel it. So I think we can do a lot to sustain compassion and unity in schools. But let's be honest, as long as our politicians are spewing hate, and I mean, I'm going to say, I grew up, you know, like I'm not a closed book on this. I come from a Democratic family. I'm a strong Democrat. I believe and I voted Democratic all my life. But both sides spew hate right now, and both sides, I'm sorry to say this, benefit from hate. So we got to demand different things. I think we should demand that our politicians be called out when they spew hate. You know, I don't know about you, Angela, but when I was a kid, hate was a dirty word. My mother said, you don't say you hate anybody.
I
You
still
can
don't say
you-
that to this day. I don't use that word to talk about people.
Right. But when we hear other people talk hatefully, sometimes I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I just assume, well, hey, that's what politicians do. We gotta, that's of course I hate him or I hate her. Wait a minute. That's infecting our children. That's poisoning the wells of our souls. We ought to call people out on this and demand that they campaign on their vision, on their hopes, on their dreams, on their capacity to unite us. Why don't we demand a candidate? I don't care which side it is.
Mm-hmm.
I'll vote for you if you've got the best plan to unite this district, this city, this town, this state, this country. And all of a sudden, let's see what comes through our emails when we ask them that question. We have to change our politics. I mean, we do. We have to come up with new solutions to this problem of division. If we don't nail this, let's be honest, what is racism? In my view, other than the desire of one group to divide themselves from another group and make themselves superior. That's it. It's institutionalized hatred. That's what racism is. If we don't call out hatred and division at the core of our country and our institutions, we'll be fighting about tax policy and education reform and bridges and highways forever. And we'll still have a country that makes us lonely, afraid, and angry.
I agree with you when you talk about hate. And, Marianne Williamson in the book, she talks about radical love. And she says only a fierce love, a brutally honest love, a love that is willing to look squarely into the face of a political and economic system that refuses to love will be powerful enough to change the world. Do you think this country will ever get to that type of love when we're surrounded by so much hate and nowadays misinformation that fuels the hate?
Well, I grew up with people who believed that we could. And some of them gave their lives trying. And when those tragedies happened in my life, the people around me said, don't be defeated. Keep trying, keep working on that. I mean, Shar, the question is, what else is a life worth living if not given to that hope? And success may be more about committing yourselves to the cause than seeing the necessity of the outcome. And I think if enough of us have the courage to commit ourselves to the cause of compassion for one another, dignity for all, healing for those who are wounded, love driving out hate, as Dr. King said, light driving out darkness. If enough of us commit ourselves to that cause, then we'll look around and we won't feel lonely when we try. And we'll feel like we got a team. We have people with us, and we can be sustained when we lose hope by others who buoy us up. I hope so.
How do you personally stay hopeful?
On my knees. I don't know. Angela, I believe in a higher power, and I believe in the goodness of the human spirit. I was last week, the first time I was out in schools again. Shar, you would have been so happy to see the kids in one of the high schools I visited in Utah talking about inclusion, talking about, one captain of the high school lacrosse team talking about how he's playing games and sports with kids with very significant disabilities. And he said in his words, the challenge is to overcome the fear of difference. He said it takes a little effort, but you can do it. I'm looking at him, 17 years old, young, idealistic. That gives me hope, Angela. I was with a bunch of elementary school kids, 8 and 9-year-olds, and we were sitting on the mat in a circle, and we were discussing words that matter. And one of the words is tolerance. Mm-hmm. And the kids said, well, what's that mean? And they had the definition on the back. You tolerate people, you allow them to be different, and so on and so forth. And you know what this little boy said? He said, that's not enough. He said, that's not enough. That's not enough. He said, we shouldn't just tolerate. This is 8 years old. We shouldn't tolerate. We should love other people. So that gives me hope. I think that's who we really are. I think the hatred and the violence and the hostility is, it's part of human nature, but it's not the real us.
Right.
I think the real us is that little boy saying tolerance. That's not enough. Imagine. This is anyway. So I try to look at the heart of people, and when I'm capable of seeing heart to heart, it gives me a lot of hope.
Why has your family, Tim, always been so, open to just doing what's right? Like, I'm reading a great book right now, The Sword and the Shield, and it talks about how Martin Luther King Jr. and John F. Kennedy used to just have conversations, and those conversations was what was opening John F. Kennedy's eyes to like, yo, we got to make these things right. Like I can't remember the name of the speech, but it was the speech John F. Kennedy gave just about how we have to bring the country together, and we got to get rid of systemic racism and yada yada yada. I'm like, why have y'all been so open to that? Your whole family, it seems like.
Well, I could just look at I look to my ancestors on this one. I mean, my dad, my mom, they were raised in a deep faith. They were raised with a conviction. Can't compare these experiences, but, my grandparents experienced a lot of discrimination, too. They were fighters. My grandfather on my mom's side, felt like he had to prove himself, but he understood that people were being discriminated against unjustly. I have an aunt, Shar, who had an intellectual disability, and she grew up at home, and so when you have 9 kids and they're all competitive, and one of them is looked down upon by the rest of the world. They love, you love your sister and the world doesn't understand her. It makes you angry and fierce, not about changing your sister, because they knew their sister was fine. My mom knew her sister Rosemary was a beautiful human being. She was just furious that the world didn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those formative experiences in life give us the strength to try to heal. I think our own wounds. I'll speak for myself. I spent first decade of my professional life in an urban public high school, and I think those kids healed me. They taught me how to see clearly. They taught me to love first. I mean, this is the absolute last thing I expected to learn in a comprehensive American urban public high school teaching social studies. By the way, this is 35 years ago, changing the curriculum so that we would teach. I mean, people think this is rocket science. It's not rocket science to tell the real story of the United States. This is not something new. Of course I could spend 2 weeks on the Harlem Renaissance or, those kinds of stories. The kids came to life with it. We taught the Amistad story. This is in 1980, right? As part of American history. It got made into a movie, thank God. But, this was hidden news. This was news in those days. It shouldn't be news today that we have a diverse story, that we have a story of oppression and a story of triumph. They have a story of equality and we have a story of slavery. I mean, come on. Why is this even complicated? History teachers have known this stuff for years. So I don't know. I'm rambling a bit here, but the book tells the story of what sustains me. Mm-hmm. What I think has motivated members of my family over the years to stay in the fight is the joy of it too. Let's not forget, to be in this work. You've seen the ladies at the soup kitchen or the guys in the homeless shelter, people working there. They walk around with smiles on their faces. They seem to know that to be fully alive is to be unafraid of anything, like to be compassionate, open to everyone. And I think my folks, my uncles, my aunts, they taught me that this was joyful work. This isn't just the burden of responsibility or guilt or justice, but this is joyful work. And for me, that's the way it's been my whole life.
And it was the televised address to the nation on civil rights on June 11th, 1963. I just want people to go look that up because that is literally how we want our politicians to talk. Like he was just speaking.
Yeah, but your point is, look, it's not news, right?
Yeah.
Why do we have this in our history 50, 60 years ago, and we're still struggling to bring it to life today? Why are we listening to these guys in the Senate and the House, these men and women, screaming and hollering and hating on each other as though that's good?
Mm-hmm. That's
and
right.
driving up contributions. Oh my God, listen to how hateful that person is. Let me write some checks so I can hate him on. I mean, geez, gang. You can't love your country and hate your fellow countrymen. I mean, this is old messages, right? You can't go to the mountaintop and look down and see splitting the world between the good and the bad. I mean, you just got to. God is anyway. I'm convinced that the work we have to do as a country, centers on healing division. Full stop. Wherever it rears its ugly head, we have to heal it. And that's not compromise with principle. That's not being inattentive to power dynamics. That's recognizing that the primal power dynamic is diminishing and humiliating the other. Seeing the other as having dignity and respect and giftedness is the primal shift we all need to make. It comes from the heart. It's a mental health issue, also a political issue.
Absolutely. Well, look, the book is The Call to Unite. Okay, Voices of Hope and Awakening. It's available everywhere that you buy books now. Tim, thank you very much, my brother.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shar. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And God bless you for all your work. And let's keep at it together.
Absolutely. It's The Breakfast Club.